Is it live? Oh, it didn't even count down. We are live. What's up, everybody?
All right.
I forgot to count tonight. We're just rolling.
Love it.
Yeah. We're a little off our game, but we're fixing up some final graphics for the show tonight. So I forgot to count us down, but that's all good. We'll just rock and roll. We are Biscuits and SEC. This is Biscuits and SEC Live. This is our, goodness, I don't know, 30th show, something like that. We're getting up there. 29th. We've been doing a lot of shows over the course of the last year and plan to keep going. So thank you guys so much for joining us and joining us post NFL draft. We got a lot to talk about tonight. We got the SEC dominating the NFL draft again, as they do seemingly every year. The Longhorns are spending a lot of money in terms of their roster for this year. Not just them, there are others as well, which we'll get to. And then we'll touch on SEC baseball tonight and just check in with what's going on the diamond, as well as Chris Lemonis out at Mississippi State and where they're going to go from here. So a lot to get into, but before we get into all that, we are sponsored tonight by the Steer Agency. Football is all about strategy, just like winning in business. Whether you're dialing up the perfect play on Saturdays or looking to dominate in public affairs, PR, or digital marketing, you need a team that delivers results. So that's where the Steer Agency comes in. They craft winning strategies that get you seen, heard, and ahead of the competition. Don't just play the game, control it. Visit thesteeragency.com today and take your brand to the next level. Okay, thank you to the folks over at the Steer Agency for sponsoring tonight's show. Also, before we get into it, sign up for the newsletter, the Morning Biscuits newsletter. That's written by myself, Bossman and Hammer, on Mondays and Fridays during the season, and during the off season on Wednesdays. So Hammer got it out today, which great newsletter, all the tidbits, all the happenings and goings on around the SEC right now, big time for the transfer portal. So we're tracking everything going on with the transfer portal. So make sure to sign up for that. It's free to subscribe. So we hope you will check that out. Also be sure to follow us on all social media platforms, as always, on X, Instagram, and Facebook at Biscuits and SEC. And also be sure to go follow our YouTube channel as we're trying to grow that as well. You can find us, just search Biscuits and SEC, and it'll pop up there. Also, I got the set fixed. So for folks who have been watching for the last couple of weeks, I won't have any problems with changing the set mid-show because over my shoulder here, one of them you can see I've got a flag up. So the sun will not be a problem tonight. But Hammer, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. Yeah, it was an interesting week, of course. Yeah, with the NFL draft, a big weekend in SEC baseball, both on and off the field. So a lot to get into. I'm excited to chat through everything.
Absolutely. Going to be a lot of fun. So let's start here with the NFL draft, which the SEC dominated per usual. We can pull up these stats right here. SEC had 79 players drafted, which was the most for one conference ever. The Big Ten was second with 71. 19th consecutive year that the SEC has had the most overall draft picks of any conference in the country in the NFL draft. You can see there that third one, 14th time in the last 15 years that the SEC has either tied or had the most first-round draft picks of any conference. And then nearly half of the first round was from the SEC this year. 15 draft picks out of 32 in the first round were from the SEC, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then the top two teams out of the SEC, the only two that had double digits, were Georgia and Texas. Georgia had 13 picks. Texas had 12. So just up and down, the SEC dominated the NFL draft, as we all know. Most of us here are SEC fans. We get the Big Ten fans in here every once in a while that like to talk some trash, which is always fun. But it's hard to argue with the stats. The SEC from top to bottom, as all of us SEC fans know, is a stacked conference with talent all across the board. And the first round picks here, those 15 guys, just talent all over the place, right? You had offensive linemen taken, you had quarterbacks taken, wide receivers, defensive linemen, cornerbacks, all out of the SEC here. And some guys that, I don't know that all those guys there are going to be hits. as Aggie fans, right, we know a lot about Shamar Stewart. He's got a high ceiling, but his production at A&M was probably, below where you would expect, I guess, the 17th overall pick to be. And there's a couple other guys in there who had, some ups and downs during their career. But all of those guys were drafted in the first round because they have such a high ceiling. So, Hammer, give me just some of your thoughts, initial takeaways from the draft, and just some of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to sort of just piggyback off of what you were starting with there, of course, the SEC dominance continues. Pretty unbelievable, 19 years in a row to have the most players drafted, 15 first-rounders, insane. And, to me, it just speaks to, or it's just sort of validation, right, for what folks like you and I, other SEC fans, see every weekend and also talk about. I know the SEC gets a lot of hate from other conferences or just general fans of like the conference pride and, whatever. I think, personally, I think it's less just like straight up conference pride, but also like we're trying to communicate how good the league is. And, this is always very validating because to me, it puts to bed a lot of the SEC bias stuff, right? Of like, oh, the SEC always gets the benefit of the doubt. And okay, I mean, look around at not just what happens on the field in college football more often than not, but then the NFL, like at every step from high school recruiting to play on the field during college, the NFL draft, like the SEC is validated as being the top league. And so that's kind of what I took away was just yet again, the SEC dominates, despite the fact, of course, I pointed this out in the newsletter, that the Big Ten has 2 more teams now, right? So, I get it, right? The SEC broke their own record for most draft picks and all that. And it's like, well, yeah, they did add Texas and Oklahoma, which, matter of fact, accounted for that difference. I think between the two of them, Texas and OU, there was 14 players drafted, and the SEC beat their old record of players drafted by 14. So that checks out. However, they still beat the Big Ten, despite the Big Ten having 18 teams. So again, per capita, whatever metric you want to look at, the SEC remains atop the college football world. And, last year, I think especially that noise kind of turned up around, is the SEC, and we talked about it on here plenty too, is the SEC down? Are they losing their grip? And I think the argument can be made that on the field, the SEC play was down, but this is just another indication that they're still on top. The SEC is the top dog. The NFL scouts, obviously, who do this for a living, feel that way. And they felt that way for 19 consecutive years.
Yeah, that's right. And, another thing we've talked about, too, is how we're going more towards an NFL model, right, in college football. And one stat you put in our rundown here, which is great, is between the SEC and the Big Ten, right? So our 2 big conferences, our 2 super conferences, potentially even more expansion, on the horizon in the next, decade for both of those conferences, and potential consolidation. Who knows how it all ends up? But between those 2 conferences this year, 58% of all draft picks, so over half of the entire draft, came from the SEC and from the Big Ten. So, I mean, that's kind of obvious, right? If you watch college football, that's where you think most of the draft picks should come from, especially looking back last year at how down the ACC was. There was a lot of good football played in the Big 12, but in terms of talent, right, top to bottom, talent-wise, the SEC, obviously top dog, and the Big Ten is right, nipping at their heels, as they typically are. Typically, the Big Ten is right behind the SEC in terms of draft picks, in terms of even in terms of like recruiting rankings, right? The teams that are, higher up typically are from the SEC, with a couple sprinkled in from the Big Ten, typically Michigan and Ohio State, and then Penn State, in certain years will break into the top 10 as well, because James Franklin's done a good job recruiting there. But I think a couple other things too. There were some interesting slides, right? I mean, one of the things we can talk about for sure is Quinn Ewers. I mean, I don't fault the kid. I think Josh Pate had a good take on this, right? It was, hey, he wanted to go out and he wants to prove himself and he wants to be in the NFL. you can't blame a kid for leaving and wanting to bet on himself. All of us do that in our own careers, right? There's often times where you go out on a limb or you start your own business, or, you go and take a different job or what have you, because you're betting on yourself. So I think it's totally fine that he made the decision. He definitely left a lot of money on the table. That's also true. Had he transferred to a North Carolina or what have you, he probably would have commanded probably $3 to $6 million. Probably could have been total earnings with NIL money hit around 8. So he's not going to earn that for sure as a 7th round draft pick, but he'll have a chance to prove himself. And forgive me, I don't even know where he went. I thought he went undrafted. I was not watching the 7th round of the draft. Sue me, but
Miami.
Oh, that's right. He went to Miami. So he's going to get to back up Tua. He'll get, which, probably is good for him. Being a 7th round pick isn't the best situation for a former 5-star, highest overall rated recruit ever sort of thing. But I think for any of these quarterbacks these days, I've said this for years, that these kids that go in the first round, there is so much pressure that is put on them. And I think a lot of them fail because they don't have the time to sit behind a quarterback who's established and learn from them and get the chance to really, kind of acclimate to the speed of the game in the NFL, which is a lot different than college. So what are your thoughts on Quinn Ewers and where he ended up landing?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on Ewers, including his, his ranch house where he was watching the draft from, which was quite funny. But to start, about just looking forward, looking ahead for Quinn, I think Miami's a good fit. Not to get too into the weeds here, this is a college show, but in terms of NFL offenses that kind of run college schemes, Miami is at the very top, right? They run a lot of quick game, screen passes, get the ball out. Even sometimes they'll do some hurry up. They have good weapons down there with Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, I guess it is now that he's in the league. Our golden boy from A&M. So they have a ton of talent. Mike McDaniel's a very seemingly relaxed, like new age coach, like he's not going to come down on Quinn, right? He's not Bill Parcells or Sean Payton or one of these kind of more fiery guys. He's very calm, very relaxed. He's going to try to build Quinn up and, put him in a position to succeed, which I think is a good fit. And, we probably have Bama fans watching this. God forbid. I hate to see it happen, but Tua keeps getting hurt. So there is a very good chance that they're going to be turning to a backup at some point this year, whether Quinn earns the backup job or there's somebody else that they've got or that they bring in. Time will tell. But there's a very good chance this fall that somebody other than Tua is going to be starting in Miami, and it could be Quinn. So I think for him, it's a good fit. And then to bring it back to, I guess we were talking about earlier, the slide and or just sort of, his decision to leave, I was a little surprised he lasted to the 7th round. However, I mean, we did talk about it a lot. Like, he left a lot to be desired. I think this is one of those scenarios where the tape doesn't lie. If you watch Quinn work out in shorts at his pro day, I think he was at the combine. He was. So at the combine, at his pro day, he looks good. And I know he carries himself well. So he's probably interviewing very well. He probably, knows the game and talked well, but the film doesn't lie. And I think over 3 years of starting, like, there just wasn't the progression that these NFL scouts are looking for. And you would, again, as you brought up, like, you would hope somebody with his talent and his, recruiting profile with 4 years of college, 3 years starting under his belt would be a little further along than he was. So I think it's just one of those cases where there wasn't a team that, fell in love with him. And because of the tape, he falls to the late round. In terms of his decision to leave, yeah, I agree. I think Josh Pate had a good point. Personally, man, it's hard as an Aggie, right, to continue to kind of heap praise on this kid. But, like, I've seen nothing from him in the last 3 years at Texas that I could say anything bad about, right? He competed his tail off, fought through injuries, brought Texas from one of the worst decade stretches in their history. I mean, they're going 5-7, firing coaches. They cycle through multiple coaches before they get to Sark. Quinn gets there. In his first year, they go 8-4, and then they make back-to-back college football playoffs. And then this year in the 12 team, they were in the semis. So like back-to-back, Final Fours, if we're going to start calling it that. So like he was great for them. He was really good for them. And all the while he's fighting through injury, competing his tail off, and leading them to things they haven't seen since Colt McCoy, all the chatter from the fan base is, we got to get Arch in here. This guy stinks. So he's doing stuff that they haven't seen there in a hell of a long time, and he's getting no love or admiration from his own fan base, and he just took it on the chin, didn't say a word, showed up to practice, said all the right things in the media. And so after all that, for him to say, essentially, I look at it as like a loyalty thing. Like, you know what? Like, he's smart enough to recognize that, yeah, his time in Austin was done. I think everybody knew that, even though he played well for the most part in the Burnt Orange. Arch is not sitting on the bench for 3 seasons, just not happening. And plus, Quinn Ewers is in practice every day. So if there's legitimate, reason that Arch would start over him, like, he knows that firsthand. So I think the decision was clear that he had to leave Texas. And I admire him for making that decision and saying, yeah, you know what? I'm going to bet on myself, chase my dream, go pro, rather than chase a bag to go play for some school I don't care about. I don't give a dang about the team, the fan base, anything. I'm coming here for, money and to compete. Because he grew up in Texas. He always wanted to be the Texas quarterback. And so he's leaving that, kind of staying loyal to them. Like, you know what? This is my legacy. Y'all do what you want with it. But I was a starter for 3 years. I brought us to back-to-back playoffs, and then I went to the NFL. Because I do think, and we've talked about this with the portal in general, many players, like, if he had gone somewhere else, he kind of maybe would have been forgotten in a lot of circles at Texas. Whereas I think now, especially the way our society works and the way fan bases work, once he's been gone for 5-10 years, like, people will look back and very fondly remember what he did for that program. Especially once, we'll see what happens with Sark and Arch and whoever, the follow-up QB to Arch is, but like, we know how this goes. It's all cyclical. So Texas is going to have a downslide at some point, and they're going to go 8-4, and their fans are going to get their head out of their butts and realize, man, we had it pretty good with Quinn. Don't you remember that? Like, Quinn was a good dude, and he was. So I love the move from him. Yeah, kind of stinks. You turn down $8 million to make $800K, but he's not hurting for money. He made plenty of money in his 3 years, even back to Ohio State when he made reportedly $1 million just for leaving high school early. So, you never want to turn down that kind of money, but he'll be fine. And I like the decision. It seems like an old school mentality to me that rather than go chase a bag, I am just gonna, I'm gonna suck it up. I'm gonna go to the pros, bet on myself, and my legacy is at Texas. And, people, the fans, y'all do what you want with it, but that's where I played college football, and I'm not going anywhere else. And I respect it.
Yeah, that's what I would just cap it on that, is that, I have a lot of respect for Quinn Ewers, which, it's tough to say that of any Texas Longhorn as an Aggie, but I really am rooting for Quinn Ewers, and I hope he does well in the NFL. And I do think that the perception of him with Texas fans will change with time, like you mentioned, especially because if Steve Sarkisian continues to have success at the University of Texas, which I imagine he will, right? All signs point to, at some point in the next 5 years, Sark is going to break through and Texas will win a national championship. The way that they're recruiting, the talent they have, the money they're spending, which we'll get to in a bit, they'll probably break through. So I think that when it's all said and done for Steve Sarkisian at Texas, he will probably be remembered fondly there. and Steve Sarkisian is always going to be in Quinn Ewers' corner, right?
Right.
So you've got if that's the case, right, and you've got a Steve Sarkisian who is always going to put his arm around Quinn Ewers and say thank you for what you did for this program. In the eyes of Texas fans, I think some of those performances where he went cold, and he went ice cold in a couple of them. Go back and watch the tape. That includes the playoffs when we're talking about like especially the Arizona State game, where there was an entire stretch, right, from probably it was almost a quarter of football, basically, or more, a quarter and a half almost.
Yeah.
Football where he was just ice cold. Eventually, figured it out and they got the job done. But all that to say, yes, there were some performances that left a lot to be desired. But overall, the overall production, the overall performance gets him to 2 playoffs, back-to-back college football playoff semifinals. I think in the end, he will be remembered fondly at Texas and will be welcomed back on the 40 acres, anytime. And I'm interested to see how his NFL career goes. Speaking of that, quickly, I want to get to, was there anybody, and I can name a few here, I'm looking at the second and third rounds, anybody that you saw from the SEC, that were like picks of value? And I put this in our chat here if you want to look at it, but a couple of them that stood out to me in terms of some kids that stuck out to me as good value, as to where they went. One was Luther Burden. Luther Burden is a first-round talent at wide receiver, and he went early in the second round to the Bears. So he's going to have another weapon for Caleb Williams, who, hopefully in Chicago is able to get it together. But I thought he was a really good value there at 39. And then another one I looked at too, Landon Jackson in the third round to Buffalo. I know he had the injury late in the year, so hopefully his injury heals up and he's all good to go. But I think he could be a good value there. And then a couple picks later, Princely Umanmielen out of Ole Miss goes to Carolina. So bolstering that defensive line in Carolina. Those were 3 picks that I saw that I thought were pretty good values for the teams that picked them and picked them where they did.
Yeah, but I've got 2 thoughts on that. But before, I do want to comment, Quinn Ewers' ranch house that he was watching the draft in, I've got a turkey fan on the wall behind me. I love to hunt and fish as much as the next guy. That was insane. That was so over the top. I've never seen anything like that. Twitter had some pretty good jokes saying he's watching the draft from a Bass Pro Shop, or he's trying to get drafted by Cabela's, or I saw somebody said, thank goodness Miami drafted Quinn because he's been killing an animal for every team that passes on him and putting it up on his wall. I mean, again, like I said, I like to hunt and fish, but dude, there's got to be something else in your house other than, there's, I don't even know. It looked like 500, mounts on the wall. I mean, it was interesting. But anyway, that aside, in terms of picks that I liked, actually, I'll go one I liked, one I didn't like. So I liked the Trey Harris pick in, I was going to say San Diego, LA, the Chargers.
Yeah.
Because if that dude can stay healthy, he's really, really good. And the Chargers need a guy like that. I mean, Justin Herbert's a good quarterback. He can throw the ball. They just don't have a ton of weapons on the outside. And I think Trey Harris can be that with Harbaugh and Herbert and that presumably, stability, where I assume both of them will be there for a long time. I think that could be a good fit. And then one that really surprised me, I'm interested to see what you think here. Well, actually, I'll go one more and then I'll go surprise. So one more I think was good. It pains me to say this. I'm not a big Philadelphia Eagle fan, but Andrew Makuba going to the Eagles seems like a perfect spot. I mean, he seems like a guy who, he was great at Texas this year. He started multiple years at Clemson before. That seems like a guy to me that, Philadelphia picks up on the second day of the draft and he starts there for a decade because he's that kind of, talent. And I think just like a smart football player, he's not going to make dumb mistakes. So barring injury, I think that was a very good pick. The one that surprised me and that I don't like was Isaac Tesla going in the third round to Detroit. he didn't do anything at Arkansas. I mean, am I mistaken here? I remember the hype. I remember when he transferred in there, they were all pumped about him. I'm looking here. In 2 seasons, he had 5 total touchdowns, like 800 yards. And, I mean, this past season, he had 28 catches. And the season before, he had 34. So I don't understand that. I know he's big. You know, he's got a big body, 6'4", but that surprised me that early. It just seemed like, not to say that he couldn't be a good pro. I mean, Lord knows Arkansas offensively the last 2 seasons, his 2 seasons there was kind of all over the place with Dan Enos and that fiasco. And then Petrino, new system. They were better this year, but a new system that maybe he didn't fit in. But that he seems like a 6th or 7th round guy that you take a chance on because physically he's got some attributes and traits that you like. But a 3rd rounder, I was very surprised there. That felt like a big reach to me.
Yeah, I would agree. That seems like one of the – I mean, look, hey, at the end of the day, though, I'm trusting Dan Campbell. The guy has been nothing but nails and been incredible in taking that team from where it was to where they are now. Which is competing for, Super Bowls, right? They're at that level. So trusting Dan Campbell, especially as an Aggie, right? Love Dan Campbell. But that seems like one of those picks where you watch the highlight film and you fall in love with the highlights because there are Isaac Tesla has some pretty solid highlights, right? Some pretty great catches, some big, bomb touchdowns. There's a couple of those in his highlight reel that look pretty awesome, right? Like, hey, we can see the potential of this kid. He's got the big frame. He's got all that, right? So you can see the potential in it, but the production isn't necessarily there. Like, something I mentioned at the outset of the show with Shamar Turner, right? Out of A&M, that you see the ceiling, right? The ceiling, it's just through the roof. This Shamar Turner could be, he has the build and everything to be a Hall of Fame type player, right? Or a very, very good starter for a long time in the NFL. Isaac Tesla has that same build, but when you look at the production and you actually look at the stats, you're kind of like, what happened? Why did that not go as well as we thought it did? And again, this isn't all on Isaac Tesla either, right? There was a lot of stuff going on in Arkansas, including quarterback play last year that was good at times, but pretty erratic most of the time. And even the same thing with the year with KJ Jefferson, the last year with KJ and Dan Enos, right? KJ Jefferson didn't have one of his better years. That he had a good career at Arkansas overall, but his final year at Arkansas was not that good. Probably can blame that one on Dan Enos too. But I would agree. That was a reach there early in the 3rd round from the Lions.
Yeah, well, we've gone almost 30 minutes here on the draft. We haven't even brought up Shedeur Sanders. Do we want to get into that briefly? I feel like we don't need to spend a ton of time, but I briefly want to mention this because this has been gone. Shedeur Sanders, all the talk about Shedeur, it's been NFL Network, ESPN, everybody and their mom is talking about what happened with Shedeur Sanders. Yeah, we need views. So Shedeur Sanders, SEO, Shedeur Sanders.
That's right. That's exactly right. What we put in our YouTube description this week was just 60 times we put Shedeur Sanders in the YouTube description. So Shedeur Sanders, right? We all know what the story is. He was supposed to be a 1st-round quarterback. Looked like he could potentially get picked in like the top 10. Falls to the 5th round, eventually goes to the Cleveland Browns, who you told me before the show, and I did not know this, that it sounds like from what's coming out with NFL insiders is that this was an owner pick, that Jimmy Haslam came down and said, hey, this kid's still available. He's the best available on the board, obviously, by far. We're taking him. Don't care what else you guys were thinking. Made the call to the room, and they said, all right, we're picking Shedeur Sanders after we just picked a quarterback in the 3rd round with Dylan Gabriel. So kind of a whole crazy scenario. It's obviously now going to be an absolute circus at Cleveland Browns OTAs. It was already a circus with everything we know about what has been going on with Deshaun Watson for years. He's still the elephant in the room in terms of the contract and the money that is owed to him. And in terms of talent-wise, he's probably the best quarterback in the room. Obviously, that could potentially change just because of his injury. That's a really difficult injury to come back from with the Achilles tear. But Anyway, the Browns take Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. A wild slide, one of the craziest slides, probably the craziest slide we've ever seen in NFL draft history. But the funny thing with me that came out of this that is just absolutely crazy that I think we should spend a couple minutes on was the crash out from Mel Kiper on ESPN after this whole Shedeur Sanders thing, went down. I don't know if it was because he was like, he had said he had been pumping up Shedeur Sanders for months, right, about how he was going to go, how much he loves Shedeur Sanders, all this stuff. And so maybe he was feeling like it reflected badly on him and his evaluation. And so he was trying to beat his chest and protect that. But it just was odd. So I want to play this clip real quick and then we can talk about it. But all right, here's Mel Kiper.
Nobody's bad at themselves in there. That's correct, right? I mean, I think that all that matters now is what happens going forward. We talk about it all the time. There is the evaluation phase, there's the evaluation and selection phase, which we're in right now, and then there's the development and implementation phase. That's where we're heading to right now. That's all that matters for him. Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, and Lou have at it. Quarterbacks down, ratio of almost anybody. College kids now get paid. They're professional. They're getting paid. They're commercial. They're out there. You got to deal with that. If you're the NFL, you got to deal with that. Okay? He's saying whatever he's saying behind closed doors. What's he saying? I want to be the guy. I should be this. I should be that. Beyond saying he's the best player in the draft. He's the best quarterback. Second best to Travis Hunter. That's quarterback. Who is it? What quarterback out there didn't think they should have been a high first-round pick? Again, nobody's criticizing what happened. We're saying he has to deal with the reality of.
It was almost seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, that wasn't even the full clip. I mean, I know it was a little bit hard to hear. I couldn't find like the really crisp clip with the audio from ESPN, but I was watching this live when it happened, and this went on for like 3 minutes of him just like you're railing about Shedeur Sanders should have been this, and then him talking about how the NFL. They don't know how to evaluate quarterbacks. It's like, well, hold on. First of all, everyone is aware that the toughest position to evaluate in sports is the quarterback position. And it's the most valuable position in sports because of how much has to go in to being a quarterback in the NFL. You have to have the athleticism. You have to have the arm strength. You have to be able to make NFL throws to the sideline. And then on top of all that, you have to have the mental acuity. Like you have to be able to make snap decisions, that is equivalent to like, hitting the ball in baseball, right? 90 miles an hour from 60 feet. So there's so much that goes into playing the quarterback position. And we've seen so many teams, right, miss on quarterbacks throughout the years. I mean, it happens in every single draft. We all know this. Like, what are we talking about, Mel?
Yeah.
And then finally on that point, by the way, Mel Kiper hasn't batted 1,000 in his NFL draft evaluations in terms of QBs either. In fact, like I would have to go back and look. That would be a fun piece to write. Would be, hey, how has Mel Kiper done in terms of NFL draft QB evaluations? I don't know what the total stats are on that and what that looks like, but I do know that. I mean, we don't have to go back that far. You can go look at Jimmy Clausen. The guy said, "I will retire if Jimmy Clausen is not a good NFL quarterback, is not an above average, top tier level quarterback in the NFL." Jimmy Clausen was out of the league in like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, Jimmy Clausen was a total flame out.
One of the biggest busts, massive busts in NFL history. And Mel Kiper was, he's going to be amazing. He's going to be incredible. And I mean, you go look at his record, it was like 6-18 or something in the NFL. I mean, the guy did nothing. So for Mel Kiper to be acting like, none of these people in the NFL, these GMs don't know what they're doing. NFL draft evaluations for 50 years have been terrible. It's like, well, Mel, you've been doing this a long time too. And your draft evaluations don't really add up either. So especially when it comes to QB, which is proving everyone else on the panel's point, which they're saying no one's batting 1,000 here, Mel. Like, everyone knows that.
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, I'm with you. That was extremely bizarre from Kuiper. I have no idea what set him off like that or why he felt so passionately about Shedeur. I mean, I'm just honestly spitballing here. I mean, maybe he does have a relationship with Dion because Mel's been in the industry forever. Dion,
Sure.
is very well known and very well liked among, NFL people because
That's the only thing I can think is that they have some sort of relationship that he's trying to protect, or I don't know. But that was the only thing that came to mind.
Right. Because otherwise it makes no sense because even outside of nobody bats 1,000, as Reese said. Outside of that, even if you sit back and you think about this, you and I were talking about this off air, and I've heard, many people discussing this. Like Shedeur Sanders, he is a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. And if he had gone in the first round, I wouldn't have blinked an eye. Most people probably wouldn't have because he was kind of thought of that way. But because of how Shedeur carries himself, how Dion carries himself, and the circus that comes along with that, good or bad. I'm not saying it, I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying it's a circus. That's not the type of guy you want to draft to be a backup, right? I think pre-show I compared it to like a Tebow or a Johnny Manziel, where you kind of draft those guys thinking they're going to be your franchise quarterback, or you don't draft them because you don't want your backup getting more press than your starter. You don't want your fan base and all your local media reporters asking every single week, when is Shedeur Sanders going to start? Because Joe Flacco, now that he's on the Browns, or starter X for X NFL team isn't playing that well. When's Shedeur going to start? How is Shedeur doing during practice? And it's not even just going to be local media. I mean, ESPN's going to be all over it. Get Up and Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp and Colin Cowherd. Everybody's going to be talking about this guy. So if you're an NFL franchise, especially, a head coach, a GM who want a harmonious and quiet locker room, that's not a guy you draft as a backup. So it makes sense why he fell, because he was either going to get drafted early by Tennessee, Cleveland, or the Giants. And obviously Tennessee got Cam Ward. The Giants liked Jackson Dart better than Shedeur, which again, from a purely, on the field QB standpoint, I don't have a problem with that. Jackson Dart was good too,
Toss-up.
Right. The toss-up. So they liked Dart better. And then Cleveland obviously was not that big of a fan of Shedeur. So none of the other teams were going to pick him. So he fell to the 5th round, but it's not like no team was picking him to be a backup. So that's what you see whether it's a quarterback, especially when they start to slide. Well, they slide a long way because not everybody's drafting a quarterback. Half the league has a starter solidified and has, oftentimes even a backup that they've had on their roster for a couple of years. So he fell to the 5th round, but the reality is there's 3 to 4 teams max that were even considering drafting him. And so they just kept passing on him. And, I get it again, because you don't want that dude to be your backup. The circus that comes along with him being your backup is not a headache that most franchises want to deal with. And that's unfortunate for him, because I do think he's a good player. But at the end of the day, I mean, hey, that's the bed you made, your dad, Dion, you carry yourself in that way. And it's been great, honestly, for, your profile for Colorado. But when it comes to the NFL, man, it's a different animal, and they don't always like that. And they, obviously didn't really like it with him. I also think too, a few other things outside of the general, circus or media stuff, I do think that they overplayed their hand. And what I mean by that is he did not work out at the combine. He did not work out at the pro day. He only interviewed with a select few teams. He was turning down interviews. And, that's not something you do unless you are Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, the guy, undisputed. You are number one. Right. You can dictate terms because you're so good. And obviously Shedeur and Dion, and, Dion has said as much, thinks that is what Shedeur is. But again, they overplayed their hand because nobody else thought that, at least in the NFL. So you got to get what you get. And, I mean, again, hopefully it works out for him. I mean, he'd be great if he starts in Cleveland. That'd be awesome. But yeah, I mean, he's going to have to earn his spot, and I ultimately, I was surprised initially. And then the more I thought about it and the more, I heard for the reasons we just said, like, it kind of does make sense why he fell,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so two final thoughts of this, and then we got to move on. But the first is that you juxtapose the way that Cam Ward carries himself versus the way that Shedeur Sanders carries himself, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's what happened, right? Like Cam Ward came into it like, whoever wants to draft me, draft me. I'm ready to come. I'm ready to work, and we're going to win, right? When you Google Cam Ward, I want it to say American football. Like all the clips that you see of Cam Ward, he's got that chip on his shoulder of being a 0-star recruit who had to work at Incarnate Word, who had to work at Washington State, and then get his chance at Miami, right? And at every single stop, he balled out. And all the kid does is work and watch film and, and work on his foot. He's always working. He's in the lab, as they say. Shedeur Sanders, I'm not saying he doesn't have a good work ethic. I think he does, but Cam Ward is all business. And Shedeur Sanders is all flash and all this stuff that surrounds him, right? So and I think, too, that carried over into meetings, right? Like Cam Ward went into these meetings with coaches and owners and all this. And he came across as like, if you draft me, like, I'm ready to roll. And Shedeur came into it with the other message, which was, don't draft me. I'm not going to play for you. I'm the man. And I'm like, these are the 5 teams that we're considering playing for. That's it.
Right. I'm going to play for who I want.
Right. And so that goes to what you said, which is that they overplayed their hand. So yeah. And then the last thing I was going to say on it is it's amazing that the Cleveland Browns are potentially making this mistake again, because you mentioned Johnny Manziel. They've already watched this movie before, right? Yeah. You bring in the circus, and with Johnny Manziel, it didn't work out so much, right? And this is a different circus because Johnny's was just, I mean, as A&M fans, we know the whole story, right? And it was all partying, drinking, drugs. It was all of that. And Johnny just wasn't bought in Cleveland. But they brought the circus, and from day one, and now we know, years later, that in that quarterback room, there was a lot of jealousy because it was like Johnny was just trying to make it work. I mean, he's just, somebody who tries to be likable, right? I think he tries to be a likable teammate. Most folks who have played with him say that they really enjoyed playing with him. But in that quarterback room, you had like Brian Hoyer and a couple guys who had established themselves at least as, backups to starter, like borderline. Brian Hoyer did not like him. And I think it was probably because he didn't apply himself. He watched zero film and also because he was getting all the attention. It was ESPN was camped out just every single day. Johnny Manziel. How did he play today? How to go today? Without really earning it because he hadn't played it down in the NFL. So you're inviting a similar circus in now. Could be the same story that plays out in Cleveland again. Hopefully not.
Right. Hopefully not. I think at some point, with all this, like perception becomes reality because as you said, I think Shedeur works hard. I mean, you don't have the 2 seasons that he had at Colorado without like working hard. And Deion works hard, like again, Deion's flashy, but like Deion works his tail off. I'm sure Shedeur has a very good work ethic and he works hard. But like I said, perception becomes reality. If you're driving around in a Rolls Royce and you're going, you're putting out rap songs, you're doing all this stuff, which is fine. But you have to understand that perception becomes reality. And the perception is you are all about flash because you like to be flashy. Whereas, like you said, somebody like Cam Ward, you don't hear anything from Cam Ward other than he's got a chip on his shoulder and he worked his butt off. And that's what, NFL guys respect. And that played out. And I think in terms of the quarterback room in Cleveland, I think 2 of the 3 guys that are there are going to have that exact same mentality. And that is, I don't think Kenny Pickett is going to like him, and I don't think Dylan Gabriel is going to like him because those two guys are fighting for their jobs. Kenny Pickett's on his third team now. Like, that dude's hanging on for dear life in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Flacco, I think Flacco will be fine. Flacco's a veteran. He's already done the backup circuit in Cleveland, then in Indianapolis. Like, he's going to be, I hope, and I would think, kind, helpful to Shedeur and just kind of be like, hey, I'm on the last leg here. Like, I'll help you out.
I've made $150 million. Like,
yeah. But Pickett and Gabriel, I do not think that they are going to, even if they like him personally, like you said, like it's just going to be jealousy because they're going to be sitting there thinking, look, dude, I'm busting my tail and I'm trying to, stay in the league and start and be productive. And all I hear about every dang day is Shedeur Sanders. Even if I like him personally, like that's going to rub them the wrong way of like, even if he works hard and they see him working hard, they're going to be like, man, can you like call your dad or something and just tell him to shut up? Because I'm sick and tired of hearing about why Shedeur Sanders isn't playing when, like, so it'll be interesting, man. It'll be very interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could spend half a show on this, but we didn't want to spend half a show on it because so many others have talked ad nauseum about what has been going on with Shedeur. But okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left here. So let's quickly touch on this news from Texas about how much money they were spending on their roster. But before we get to that, just another quick ad read from our sponsor tonight, the Steer Agency. Football is all about strategy, just like winning in business, whether you're dialing up the perfect play on Saturdays or looking to dominate in public affairs, PR, or digital marketing. You need a team that delivers results. That's where the Steer Agency comes in. They craft winning strategies that get you seen, heard, and ahead of the competition. Don't just play the game, control it. Visit thesteeragency.com today and take your brand to the next level. All right, shout out to those guys. Thank you for sponsoring the show. All right, let's move on here just quickly. Let's touch on this because then we got to get to SEC baseball. And then we also have a Biscuit of the Week is back this week. So we mentioned this a couple weeks ago. There was a story that came out from John Talty. I think I mentioned it last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. And it had some quotes in there about how we've reached the point of $30 to $40 million rosters. And it had a lot of quotes from Curt Cignetti at Indiana, who was discussing this, basically saying like, hey, we're Indiana and we're doing our best. And we're in a good position in NIL, but there are teams that are spending gobs and gobs of money on top of our head that we can't compete with. And the number that came out was $30 to $40 million rosters. So then it came out today or yesterday that pretty much Texas is spending 35 to 40 million on their roster this year. And a little bit of that too, just for background for folks who aren't as plugged in, this is going to stop. Like this will get capped because of what's going to happen with the settlement with the NCAA. And eventually we're going to get a little bit more structure to where there's a cap and teams can't spend this amount of money. So right now there's a big push to spend as much money as you can this year to try and win a national championship this year and just put all your cards on the table, push your chips all in and spend the money you have now because a lot of things are going to change in the coming years with the amount of money that you can spend on your roster. But this year, Texas is one of them. Looks like 35 to 40 million for them. I know Ohio State as well. I know Ohio State is spending gobs of money. And there's others that are right there nipping at their heels. I guarantee you Texas A&M, speaking of, is spending a lot of money on their roster too. So what were your thoughts seeing this news and just your reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that when I first read it, my jaw kind of hit the floor just thinking, wow, really? Like, can this really be happening? But then, as you said, you sort of get over the initial shock and you're like, oh, well, yeah, of course, right? I mean, look, Texas or A&M or Ohio State or any big name program, like they have money and they want to spend it. Like that is what these universities do. They love football. They pour money into football. And that, it used to be, your stadium or your coach or your coaching staff or your facilities. That's what they dump the money into. Now it's NIL. So it's crazy. I'm interested to see when the House settlement comes down, if it ever does, what they end up capping it at, because I guess that's my real problem with this, right? Like if we're going, to an NFL type model, like, again, I don't love that, but I understand that's reality and that's where we're going. So let's get there, and let's get to a point where everybody's got the same dang budget. Again, there will always be things that schools that have money will be able to one up the other ones that don't. I never expect in Indiana, for instance, to be even resource wise when it comes to football with Texas A&M, Alabama, Florida, Ohio State, you name it. Like, I don't expect that, but I do think this is unhealthy for the sport, where you have a team or a very select few of teams that can throw $40 million at a roster on a single given year, and then 90%, of the rest of the teams, like, they can't even come close. So, I don't love it. I'm not that surprised. I think you're right. There's a lot of other teams that are right around this number. I guess, honestly, the thing that I'm almost fascinated with, in the NFL, right, everybody has the same amount, same salary cap, but you also know the contracts, right? Like, that's what I'm kind of curious about. So Texas is paying $40 million to their current roster. Like, feel free to chime in here, Texas fans, but like, y'all just had 12 dudes drafted. Like, who on the current roster is getting all that cheddar? Because, okay, Arch Manning, sure, or Colin Simmons. Like, there's a few dudes, but like, there's a lot of dudes that most people have never heard of that are probably making over $1 million, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just crazy to wrap your head around, right? Like, oh yeah, the backup defensive tackle that didn't play last year because he backed up Vernon Broughton. Yeah, he makes 1.5. You're like, what? But that's just reality. So interesting to see where this goes from here again with the House settlement, but I don't love, again, the kind of the Wild West nature of it all,
I agree. Yeah, it frustrates me as well. But hey, smoke them if you got them. You got the money, spend it, right? Like
right.
There are no rules right now. So
right.
If you got it. Texas isn't doing anything wrong in this situation.
Nope.
So, all right. Well, let's we just wanted to quickly touch on that. And now we want to get to SEC baseball because there's a lot going on in SEC baseball. Why don't we start here with what's going on in Starkville? And we saw that Chris Lemonis, head coach, was fired, mid-season, 3/4 of the way through the season at Mississippi State. And there was rumblings about this for a while. Mississippi State fans were pretty frustrated, I think, and especially just as this year had gone. So here's a graphic just that kind of spells out what's been going on there. But overall, he had a pretty good winning percentage, at Mississippi State. Excuse me. But this year, 25-19, so just above 500. In the SEC in college baseball, that doesn't cut it, right? That's on the cutting line for the NCAA tournament. Right now they're in danger of missing the NCAAs for the third time in 4 years after winning a national title in 2021, the school's first national title. And Lemonis was named 2021 Coach of the Year after that national title. And there's a proud history at Mississippi State. They love baseball there. It's you don't want to say it's a baseball school, but I think you probably can say it. It's a baseball school, right? Like they've been up and down, decent at football at times, but I think they're the only school. In fact, I read this today. I think they're the only school to make the NCAA tournament in 4 straight decades. I don't think any other school has done it. So there's a proud tradition at Mississippi State for baseball. And at the end of the day, Chris Lemonis just didn't get it done, right? I mean, you win a national title, like that gets you a lot of leeway, a lot of runway. But then on the verge of missing the NCAAs for the third time in 4 years, like something's got to change. They want to be competing for national titles and going to Omaha and hosting regionals. And right now the program is just not there.
Yeah. My only real thoughts on this, other than what you just said, was maybe this is an old school or weak mentality. I don't know, but I would have given him to the end of the season. The guy won a dang natty for you. Like, you have to let him go a month before the season ends. Like, I don't like that. I think what happened here, and I get this too, because this is major college athletics, big money, like big things on the line. My hunch is they made the decision, we need to move on from this guy, and they did not want the team to get hot and go on a run. Not to make a parallel here, but Ole Miss was pretty dang close to firing, I can't remember the guy's name, but their coach a couple of years ago. They sneak into the tournament as a 4 seed and win it all. Now, it's worked out for them because they, A, won it all, and B, he's been good.
They're good.
But I think that's what you're looking at here is they decided we need to move on. And rather than let this thing play out on the off chance this team gets hot and goes on some kind of a run, let's just cut bait now. So I understand that idea, but I just don't like, treating somebody like that won you a national title. But I think ultimately, the writing's on the wall. I read a little bit about this. I don't keep up with Mississippi State baseball, especially their roster, that closely. But the sentiment was essentially, he comes in, he goes to the College World Series in his first year, then COVID hits, and then he wins it in his third. And then things fell off a cliff. And the consensus was kind of from Mississippi State side that, he kind of did that with other people's players, like when it finally came time for him to turn over the roster and get things going, he really struggled. And they had a decent year last year, but didn't get out of regional play. And as you said, this year they're kind of struggling, in danger of missing the tournament again. So I get why you got to move on, but unfortunate for a guy that won you your only national title in any sport in school history. So, yeah.
And surprisingly, I mean, speaking of how many times they made, the NCAA tournament, and they, 4 decades straight, they make the NCAA tournament. How did they not win one before that? But they didn't. And he's the one who got him over the hump there. So,
right.
There's a couple candidates out there that folks are talking about. Most of them are assistant coaches, except for the head coach at Kentucky, who, remind me his name. It's escaping me.
Nick Mingione.
Yes, Mingione. That's right.
Yeah.
Who was an assistant at one point at Mississippi State. So there is connection there. Mingione has Kentucky playing pretty well. He's got that program in a good place. They're not, ascendant or extremely good, but they're good. And, it's a tough series whenever you have to play them.
He's been the best coach they've ever had.
Yeah.
I mean, they went to Omaha 2 or 3 years ago, which doesn't happen at Kentucky. So he's good.
He's done a good job for sure. So he's the name at the top of that board, I would say, from the names that I've seen out there. Others, I'm sure there's some good assistants out there that absolutely should get some consideration. But, if I'm Mississippi State and making a move like this 3/4 of the way through the year and firing a coach like this, they're swinging for the fences. So I would assume that they are going to throw a good amount of money at Mingione and try to get him to Mississippi State. So we'll see where they end up going.
My thought on that is kind of what you said. Like, Mississippi State's a baseball school, and I don't want to talk down to them. I like Mississippi State. I think they have a great fan base. But this, to me, as you said, this signifies we see the writing on the wall in football, especially with OU and Texas now in the conference. Like, basketball is kind of a crapshoot, and they had a good year this year, so credit to Mississippi State. But I think their athletic department is looking at this and going, we have to be good at baseball. Like, we're a baseball school. Dudy Noble, in my opinion, and I know Mississippi State fan opinion, is the best college baseball environment in the country. That stadium is phenomenal. They cannot afford to be a bad baseball program. They can go 4-8 in football, but they better be hosting the dang regional in baseball. And I agree. This signifies that. The firing, timing, and then we'll see what they do. I saw a couple of their names. I saw the Clemson coach, Eric Bakich. I don't think he's leaving. I know he sort of flirted not flirted, but A&M was rumored to be interested in him last year. He shut that down. I don't see that happening. A couple other ones were mentioned was within the conference, and this is I just don't see happening, but OU's coach Skip Johnson, Auburn's coach Butch Thompson, and Georgia's coach Wes Johnson all have done a good job. I don't know that they would leave a sitting unless they're throwing big money, but we'll see. But either way, I think this signifies that Mississippi State needs business, and they need to, we want to be good at baseball. We're not going to take mediocrity.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I even with those names mentioned, I hadn't seen those head coaches mentioned yet. The only list I saw had about 5 names, and one of them was Mangione at Kentucky. And because of that connection with Mississippi State, I suspect that he's the highest on the list, right? Even with those other coaches, because of those other coaches have done a very good job with those schools and have them in the top 15 and that sort of thing. So it would be surprising if they left that sort of situation at schools who have big money, right? It could match something with Mississippi State throughout there. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. All right. We're going to get some free baseball or some free football tonight. We like to do that every once in a while here at Biscuits SEC. So we'll be going a little bit over time, but this was last week's results in the SEC. There were some interesting ones. I mean, Arkansas lost another series. Florida getting a little bit hot again. Mizzou continues to be terrible. Georgia, that was a ranked on ranked series. Georgia gets a series win, which they needed. And then the big one that we talked about last week was Texas and Texas A&M with Jim Schlossnagle in his first series against his former team with that crazy coaching change that happened in College Station with Schlossnagle going to a heated rival, arch rival in Texas. And Texas got to host that series. So the first one and the only one this year was in Austin, and they go 3-0. They sweep the Aggies, and all 3 games were by 1 run. We took it in the chest for us Aggies over the weekend. It was a tough series, but the Longhorns did their job. And look, Schlossnagle has these guys playing at an incredible clip. You can't say anything else other than that. I mean, their record in the SEC is ridiculous. They've only lost like 4 or 5 games on the year. They're obviously the number 1 team in the country. And the amazing thing about it is that, Schlossnagle is pretty much doing this with the roster that David Pierce had last year. Like they got a couple kids in the transfer portal, but none of the kids from A&M followed him to go to Texas. And, if you were just looking at it, and everybody thought this, like before the year, A&M's roster versus Texas's roster, A&M should whip them, basically. And that hasn't been the case. And that just shows you how much coaching matters. And Jim Schlossnagle is one of the best in the business right now. There's just no other way, to put it. The guy's a heck of a coach, and he's getting every inch and every last ounce out of this roster that he can. And a lot of credit also goes to Max Weiner, the pitching coach. Texas's ERA is ridiculous, and that pitching staff is doing an incredible job this year with their rotation. And also, it's next man up. Texas lost their number 1 starter a week ago, and now it's just like, okay, next man up, let's roll. Boom, they get a series sweep. They didn't even have their ace, against the former number 1 team in the country, the preseason number 1 team. So, Schlossnagle just has these kids playing at an incredible clip, and they've got a big one coming up this weekend here against Arkansas.
Yeah,
they had to Arkansas.
Finally get a road series.
Yeah. Greg Sankey did a great work on the scheduling for the Texas Longhorns this year in every sport. We're not bitter. Don't worry. Yeah. Texas heads to Arkansas. That's going to be a great series. Arkansas sorely needs a series win. They've been on a little bit of a slide here. And then we've got some other great series coming up as well. Just, 3 other ranked on ranked matchups. You got Auburn heading to Knoxville to play Tennessee. Oklahoma hosts Ole Miss. And then Vanderbilt is hosting Alabama. So another awesome weekend of baseball in the SEC. Any thoughts either on the Aggie series with Texas or what we have coming up?
I'm very interested in the Arkansas and Texas series because, as you mentioned, Arkansas has lost a couple series in a row. They're at home. They kind of need, I think for like their own psyche and certainly the fan base, like they need a series win here, and getting that at home against number one would be big. And from the Texas side, yes, I'm interested. I was making a joke about them not playing road series, and I'm bitter and I sound like a loser when I say that. I'm self-aware enough to know that. But this is the first big road series they've had. I believe up to this point, Texas has played, somebody correct me, but they haven't played a ranked SEC team on the road yet that I know of. I think they went to Kentucky and they went to maybe Florida and they went to Mizzou. So, Florida, Kentucky, like those are good teams, but they're not ranked. So this is the first boom, hostile territory, 3-game series, and again, Arkansas, one of the best environments. So interested to see how that goes. And then just to piggyback what you said about Texas and Sloss and all that, pains me to say it, but they are freaking good. They held A&M in that series, as you mentioned, their pitching staff to a total of 8 runs, and they beat them by 1 run in every game. So Texas scored, 11. If you can score 11 runs in the SEC and sweep a series, that's insane.
Yeah.
A&M the week before against Arkansas on the road again. A&M was at Arkansas, then at Texas. A&M scored 7 runs, 5 runs, and then 9 runs. Yeah. So they scored 21 runs against Arkansas in 3 games, and then they scored 8 against Texas. So Max Weiner, I said it a couple weeks ago. I'll say it again, especially with the Mississippi State job open. I don't think that's the direction they're going to go, but trust me, hire Max Weiner. I would much rather him be in Starkville than Austin. So please get rid of that guy. I don't want to face him again.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was great when he was on our team. Hasn't been so great when he's been on the other side. Monkey's got the gun right now if you're an Aggie.
Yeah.
But the final thing to say on that too is that, yes, those were all 1-run games that Texas won, and A&M was threatening in every single one of those games. All 3 games, they had runners on in the 9th inning that would have either they had the go-ahead run on, I think in 2 of those games, and they had the tying run on in one of those games. So, I mean, and they were able to get it done, right? They caught Terrence Keel looking twice on a strikeout, and then were able to close it out. Their pitching staff just was nails. They had grit and they got it done when it mattered. So impressive series win for Texas in a highly emotional series in Austin.
Yeah.
So, all right, that should do it for us tonight. But we have one more quick segment that we want to get to, which is our Biscuit of the Week. The Biscuit of the Week is back. Hammer found a good one this week for us, which is from our friend who we've been following this guy for years, and we love all of his content. So, Hammer, I will let you take us into our Biscuit of the Week.
Yeah. So, in case anybody's new here, we have not done this in a while. We typically do it every week, especially during the season. We'll do a Biscuit of the Week. We're Biscuits and SEC. We love food. We love biscuits. So, we like to feature biscuits that we think look good, whether we made them ourselves. One of y'all out there DM'd them. We had several great submissions during last season of fans of the show that would just DM us this biscuit. We'll feature them. Happy to do that. So if you're making biscuits, send them our way. And then if all else fails, we didn't make any, our fans let us down and didn't send us any, we'll just scour social media to find one, which is what we did here. So we're bringing this back because this just popped up on my Instagram feed the other day. And it's from a guy, Chef Jean-Paul Bourgeois from Louisiana, as you would expect. And I'll roll the clip and then I'll say a few words about it.
And that is your boudin biscuit with a fried egg and bacon, onion, jam. There you go, partner. You want some of that? There you go. It's hot there, buddy. Man. It doesn't matter what kind of game you're making boudin.
How about that, partner?
How about that, partner? Yeah. So for all you Cajuns out there, Jean-Paul, of course, is very Cajun. But he's Alex or Bossman mentioned, we've been following him for a while. He's a big outdoorsman and chef. He's a culinary trained chef, used to run restaurants in New York. So very, very talented chef, extremely talented Cajun cook. And he does a show called Duck Camp Dinners where they go hunt ducks, and he makes like what looks like the best duck camp food you've ever had in your entire life. This happened to be one of those clips. He's making boudin biscuits with a fried egg. I mean, you got to be kidding me. That looked phenomenal. That's one thing I've never even attempted to make is my own boudin. So if anybody has a recipe, hit me up because I like it, but it's not something I have in my repertoire at the moment.
Yeah, we aren't Cajuns, that's for sure. But yeah, his stuff is incredible. He even put a little bit of jam on that biscuit, which sausage and egg with a little bit of jam on your biscuit and some butter. Oh my gosh, yeah, that was good stuff. So good find there, and definitely go check out Chef Jean Paul if you guys haven't already, because he's the freaking man. That's for sure.
He is.
So, all right. Thank you guys all for joining us tonight. We were brought to you by the Steer Agency. Make sure to sign up for the Biscuits and SEC newsletter, the Morning Biscuits newsletter, which comes to you every Wednesday during the off season, written by yours truly, Bossman and Hammer. Also comes to you we ramp it up during the season. So Mondays and Fridays, it comes to you during the season as we have more football news and more to get to. But all the goings on around the SEC that you need to know about, we will keep you guys informed. We are plugged in on social media. We've got everybody that covers the SEC, and we aggregate a lot of that and do some reporting and put that all in the newsletter for you there. It's all free to sign up. So go ahead and check that out, biscuitsandsec.com/newsletter. And you can also check us out on social media at Biscuits and SEC across social media platforms. And please be sure to go to our YouTube channel as well and hit that subscribe button as we are trying to grow that. We will also be on SEC After Dark tomorrow night. So be sure to check that out on the SEC After Dark channel. You'll be able to find it on most of these channels as well that you guys are watching us on tonight. So thanks again for joining us. We appreciate you guys joining us on this Wednesday night. And we look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow night for SEC After Dark. And then again next week, same time, same place.
Yep.
Thanks.
Appreciate y'all. Bye.